Thanks. Jonathan Caldwell will now talk to us about the proposed draft scope for the State of the Environment Report 2028. Thanks, Jonathan.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you. Yeah, so my presentation this morning really provides a summary of a review that the science section has undertaken of our environmental monitoring programs that will help inform an extended scope of monitoring for the next State of Environment, which is due in 2028. So, driver for this review mainly as a result of various gaps in our monitoring that was identified in our last 20 State of Environment. Bearing in mind that there was quite a long period of time or gap before the previous State of Environment report, first State of Environment done by Council back in 2008. So by 2028, we hope to have refined it even further and filled it. So those monitoring gaps that were identified in the last State of monitoring of wetlands, monitoring of biodiversity and biosecurity, geothermal monitoring, coastal water. So following the publication of the 22 State of Environment, this committee had a workshop in November 2023 where it was recommended that a formal review be undertaken for the following changes sought. That we increase the scope and extend biosecurity and terrestrial biodiversity monitoring. We include monitoring of soil fauna and productive landscapes that are new technologies that improve our ability to monitor change and great information agencies. So with more specific focus on biosecurity monitoring, this committee recommends indicators that are in the biosecurity strategy to inform biosecurity effectiveness. That we extend monitoring to include taking of new visions and tests, and that we work with other agencies. So in response to this, science program is being developed through additional scene that will become available. We will have dedicated scientists. In the interim, though, science staff will ICM staff to collate and analyze data collected. We'll also look at some operational plan report. And we'll also be using it. But development of the indicators by that additional fund available in July 6th. So once we create it, work will begin on developing those. Regards to terrestrial biodiversity monitoring, the mission of this committee was to work with partner organisations to go beyond health, fair ecosystems, species. So with regards our response, a region-wide terrestrial monitoring program has been established, which so Tier 1 refers to monitoring 180 spots across the region that will be. This will help us take long-term and inform management decisions both nationally. And Tier 1 monitoring has already communicated that 5% baseline monitoring. Tier 2 refers to nationally consistent monitoring managed places and species. To example of this is This will be funded from July 26. Tier 3 includes intensive species monitoring for regulation. This will be funded 7. So tier 2 and 3 monitoring will not be available for state of environment and getting. What we will be including is the report 18 biodiversity indicators, which are provided by the Regional Council Industrial Bio Framework, which will be used for the environment, subject to some limitations. With regards to the indicators thought by the forest health, rare ecosystem, these will be developed data used 18 indicators. So those indicators will on for in addition to this, a wetland condition monitoring program has been undergoing development. Wetland condition data won't be available for nature and the number of sites and cycle time. Also, to be included in the mapping accuracy and we're also exploring possibility ecosystems such as karst systems. Likely that but we for soil and land, the nation was to as a program is being developed. So metagenomics, DNA, multiple organisms other than just saying that this will development of it's very preliminary at this stage, but also to be included, which is the monitoring of 33 trace elements and sites. Additional indicators. Trace elements we're talking about are things like etc. This soil monitoring was set up well before the 2020 State of Environment, but at this stage it was a state that was integrated into the State of Environment. Also new will be results of gas emissions. This report will also feed into greenhouse inventory. So new will be of the yearly high resolution LIDE-based guidance rate monitoring, which was we're also exploring the use of intelligence and whether it could be applied also. Coastal marine monitoring, we now have much of water quality. This includes a large range of water indicators as well through there is also a significant research taken which will provide better link readily and impact upper and lower catchments. Regional Estuary Sediment Program has also been of indicators. This will improve our understanding of sediment dynamics, trend of broad scale changes occurring to the coastal and marine team are also exploring monitoring for coastal environment likely be included. Coastal marine team also reviewing effectiveness of current marine search and options for how to detect these. Various new technologies are also being put for monitoring of invasive species, such as trapping. If successful, this work species, individuals and their locations, state of environment. This stage it will likely be in feature box. In water quality monitoring, we indicators for all state of environment sites, which will be back. This will provide a picture of the pressure state and also provide additional insight into climate change. Response to the recent arsenic drinking water of Waikato River, now an expected focus on associated provide us with data that treatment. Information on this will actually be available for we're also exploring new technology in the form of beam transmission for clarity monitoring sites with this will provide more accurate clarity data. The development of online dashboards also provide changes and wells dashboards in the black bit and he's also looking at the arsenic treatment and this will the development of remote sensing using the satellite machine learning have been the Riverscape connect data with a data's X11 spatial scale insight of freshwater fish and weight. These developments will do and a bit more this in a lot more detail from Flavia. In the air quality monitoring space, we've now got a much better the data set for PM 2.5. These are the articles. A lot better evidence managing and monitoring minor particle sizes. So this internationally is usually used as a quality indicator and also exploring the potential using useful sources such as merchant. This will likely regards geothermal monitoring, the 22 State of Environment rapid expansion of geothermal could be supported by more targeted monitoring. Jane Jones is very keen on supporting rapid expansion of geothermal development. So it's important that we do review geothermal sample more action around the geothermal buzz, which is will be also important. Currently, we don't have a budget to address this. Amataronga Māori scientist, Ova is assisting iwi and develop Mataronga indicators of fresh water, which may be available. Assessments of play, which is an harvest quality, data for open data of the event. The gate report included date and trend. Numerous external data sources have been identified for 28. Use of these state of environment. Better strategies and management of council data and for gap filling. The stock take of how state of environment and other parties be used to help structured how the finding. So in summary, it's anticipated that the state of environment, biosecurity, industrial biodiversity is sought by the due to the time taken to fully establish supporting. Other propositions and mapping of additional indicators for addition of greenhouse gas emissions from wells, high resolution guidance monitoring wells, improvements to air quality, store water monitoring. These changes to the scope, including development of several new greatly increased changes to the environment, have previously gone. Collaboration with external agencies will also be used. Thank you.
Right. Well, there's a fair bit in there. So who's, first question, Clyde.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so the next report is 2028. When's the report due beyond that? It'll actually capture some of this.
Our main aim is really based on realizing we're
there were issues identified coming in with this monitoring, which is really good, the monitoring. Would that be brought forward a little, do you think?
Yeah, we'd definitely look at a review after the 20. And with that and what the gaps are, and we've
Quite a bit going on, which is really good, but no one's going to really see the tangible results for some time. So
Got a question for Brett. In the 2003 October vision to additional investment those 6 Harry dieback additional resource out of an LT.
Might need Mike to walk to the table for that one, because that was the work that he did for the LTP. Mike.
Yeah, through you, Chair, Councillor, in the last LTP, councillors saw a major program around the coastal quality monitoring. So that's where a lot of that resource, additional resource for boosting the coastal monitoring program comes from. There's also the biodiversity program which came through, which highlighted the tier 1, tier 2 monitoring, and also the biosecurity need for some biosecurity resource. The PEAT program, of course, which councillors have had a number of presentations on. So all of the additions that Jonathan's talked about were either identified and approved for additional resource through that last LTP, or were within the scope of work of our existing science budgets and environmental monitoring budgets, linked to previous LTPs, including the wetland monitoring.
Right, so there's no proposal that's to come.
So what Jonathan has outlined is where we're at now with our current, as Councillor Graf identified, there may be additional gaps, and I think John talking to council in a weeks about the implications of the national SOE report. It may be that we identify some gaps, that workshop that would lead through to an LTP bid in the next.
As noted here, for example, the about the move years ago, in terms of the minute you start going down this route, ahead of where the government in turn air quality lower is at 10, not at 2.5. The minute you have a significant cost for
yeah, so you're correct that we are ahead of where guidelines most countries. Where we see issues with some issues, most of it.
So why are we ahead of national environmental standards?
I think
That's a significant.
Look, as chair, I think that's a debate for another day, Ben. Actually, you could frame the whole argument a different way, that central government is behind where we're at. You just got to think this through, and I don't think we can solve that today. I think actually, because there are other people waiting and have a limited amount of time.
That's an appalling shutting me down for.
No, it's
looking
not.
sit-
It's just saying we can't solve it today.
Well, I would like to see a report on current NES for.
Well, that's a reasonable request.
And
but
its
trying to debate it
implications.
today is,
And Well, this seems to me a policy shift. 2.5, which we haven't endorsed.
We could, I
Yeah,
don't know if it was this
and
training
it
or last.
probably is timely.
And where the central government's at and what does have implications for areas like Wikaroa.
Could cover a little. National state.
But also just a reminder that you were given some examples of international standards, and the fundamental reason for this is about human health, Ben.
I don't expect the chair to be arguing with me. Ask a question, Bruce.
I'm not arguing about that. What I'm saying is we've got very limited time today, and we've got a whole lot of stuff to get through.
Oh, well.
And if you want to make a formal request for a report on the matter, you can do that. So do that.
That's what I've asked for. I'd also like to see, given this is a state environment drafting scope, I'd like to see costing. Nothing in here about the costs undertaking this additional thing above the statutory RMA requirement.
Again, I would just point out that you're moving into the territory of what will be required for the next LTP. What we heard today was a carefully staged program, and all of the items that Jonathan outlined in relation to new work and their staging were things that we agreed to in the LTP. They were very clearly articulated in his presentation. And if we're going to talk about stuff which is about the next LTP, we are not the right people to have that discussion, because we are actually on the crest of being out of it.
We are also looking at a report about state of the environment. And as part of that scope, it should include the costs. There is nothing in here about costs. So that's what I'd see.
But hang on, Ben. The costs in relation to all of the staged items that Jonathan outlined were covered in the LTP process. If you're talking about new costs that belong in another LTP, the time for that is not now.
Making decisions want in a 2008 report, endorsing this thing. And as part of that, those that we've agreed to already, the scientists, plus areas where there are, and also additional, the fair enough thing to.
So try to translate what I think what I'm hearing. Moving into the future around state of the environment monitoring, your recommendation is that the focus should be more on PM 2.5, because that's the international literature around monitoring the state of the environment and the effects on human health is 2.5. Am I correct, Jonathan, that we currently do some PM10 and some PM 2.5 monitoring?
We do both. The newer instruments will give you both.
Right. And so I think what Councillor Dummer-Smith is saying is, have we seen something before the council recommending that we move from PM10 to PM 2.5 for state of the environment monitoring? And has that is that part of our work program, or is there something additional to the current work program in terms of its funding that would be required to move the state of the environment monitoring program into a focus on PM 2.5? I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I think Ed behind you wanted to make a comment, who is the manager of our environmental monitoring section.
I could, in regards to the, that's not checked.
So I wasn't necessarily suggesting there was additional cost for monitoring 2.5. I'm questioning whether we have a council that's the standard in our, given that there's a national environmental standard, and if we start monitoring 2.5, does that then become standard if we're resting in our region?
To recall training. And if it helps, we had a lengthy conversation on it. So these new standards to the, I recall cuts were made, coalition government up for how it'll be hard to update that standard with lack of resource by the, because the people that would update it are now no longer working some of it. So I'm not seeing that change central government, but the conversation was very clear at the time about the right thing to do is to take the data when you're getting it anyway, and that it's an inevitable thing that people are. How that gets applied by our resource testing team is very.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a question for them. Yeah.
The regulatory status of different from in New Zealand. Monitoring, we're collecting data on.
Just interesting.
But the regulations as they stand are. But it is, but with a resource intent for charge of, they will always, it will always that happen.
It's
a long time.
yeah. I recalled it.
Yeah, I don't mind that we. I didn't want to see this suddenly. Most people. Patience to move. So I would anticipate that this might shift our
I think it has been a
Well,
requirement already, though, on
with regards to
conditions.
wood burners themselves, we don't vent them. We and rules we don't by law rule. And there is still there's an emission standard that was brought out in 2000 for wood and hasn't. So the regulations around wood changed in it. The only focus would be that if we're monitoring PM 2.8 and we see a problem with PM 2.5, might want that we do some management at airshed for because later or issues, that would still be a decision that would improve.
Yeah, precisely. I just didn't want this to be suddenly through as a 2.5 was no big. But I would also like to request a costing of what the draft proposal is, and that come back to us by email prior to the end of this annuum.
So I think what might be being plated together is state of the environment data and how that impacts on a consenting process. So the state of the environment data is around the impacts of this of air quality on the people in the region. An individual consenting process for a long time has not just been restricted to the National Environmental Standard around PM10. That standard talks about where you can and cannot grant resource consents. That's a slightly, and the number of exceedances that one is able to have in an airshed. That's so that if the government chooses to change that standard to reflect PM 2.5 rather than PM 10, then we will administer the government's change. But that's a standard about where you can and cannot have a resource consent if you've got exceedances above a certain limit. the consenting process is about all environmental effects. So there are not environmental standards around a range of different air quality contaminants. And so if a party is seeking consent, like the party that's seeking consent at Taumutu right now, their obligation is to present information on the contaminants and the effect of those contaminants so that it can be assessed site specifically for that application. They will be presenting information about PM10 and PM2.5 and dioxins and furans and all sorts of things that get drawn up in the consent process. So I guess what I'm saying is that PM2.5 is already part of a consent process. The regulations are where you can and cannot issue a consent if there is a if there's an airshed. And so an airshed like, and I think what Jonathan's alluding to, an airshed like Tokoroa already has a number of exceedances, and so there are challenges around consenting new discharges that trigger the Act. If the government changes the regulation around PM2.5 or they change it around nitrogen oxide or sulfur dioxide, then we will have to assess applications based on those new standards for where you can and cannot grant a consent. That's slightly different than you always have to assess the effects of your activity on the environment. It's an addition, the regs are an additional thing. Have I got that kind of right, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a lot of contaminant. There's a hierarchy, ministry from it. Okay, there's no standard. Look at a national guideline. You look typically with or moving through eminent guide. Yeah,
Okay, I would like to bring us back to what we're talking about, which is the state of the environment reporting. And if you read the front page of the state of the environment report, it actually says in it, there's a disclaimer in there. It says what we're talking about now is not binding. So I think we're confusing consenting processes with what we're discussing today, which is actually about the state of the environment report process. And it's not binding us into anything which would impact on the consent unless that is done as a separate process. What we're talking about today is the SOE. That's my major point, actually.
So accept that and park the, what I would like to see is before the end of this triennium, costing on what the proposals are. And it can come out by email to
If I may, Chair, just to test what Councillor Dunbar-Smith's asking for. So what you'd like is an estimate of how much council spends on state of the environment reporting?
yes, that they're doing a report. Does that allocated? Possibility. Need to know by 2028.
Yeah.
Actually,
and-
today is the
and-
final meeting of the committee. So I'm just concerned that what you're trying to get a work agenda, which really is not, you know, that's the responsibility of a future council.
Now, can I see if I can try to help here? I think what Councillor Dunbar-Smith is saying is that there is a recommendation in this report that this committee endorses to the full council the path forward that you have described. And so you've described a path forward that you think is the most appropriate path forward for preparing a state of the environment report that would meet the expectations that this committee has previously said they'd like you to bring back a path forward. And Councillor Dunbar-Smith is saying in endorsing that, he's interested to know what are the financial implications of placing his endorsement of the proposal, acknowledging that there's a separate process further down the track to seek additional funds. If there is a demand for additional funds, you're looking to get a bit of a gauge on the financial implications of endorsing And I think what the team have said, councillor, is they believe that this is the most appropriate path forward, putting aside that dollar figure. But there's funding for a large proportion of this already, and that anything that is additional would need to get endorsed through an LTP process. And so I see the timing around that. And so is there anything that you can share with the councillors today around,
Like the
Um,
geothermal, for example.
Well, I think
Yeah.
first of all to say what we've proposed here is within what our budgets are already funded for, including that there's some aspects that are not funded till 26 or 27. But that said, all of it's been already agreed for an LTP process. It's all funded. There are some gaps like the geothermal, which if we wanted to extend that, then we need to go to through the next LTP process. For that.
And so I'd simply like that to be stated, and that if we go seeing the draft code. It's concerned we've got a draft scope that does.
Just a moment. So the other thing to remember is that what we discuss here today will come to council's time. So there'll be another chance, Ben.
Well, no, but when it comes to full council, it should have some reference to the costings.
Well, that's where if you want to add stuff to it, but you know, today we have been given a presentation which is essentially signalling to us how these guys have responded to earlier requests as part of the LTP discussion. They have staged and planned components of work we have agreed the funding should occur for, and they've signalled a few things which are additional, which they think would need, funding which is not currently allocated, and that process can occur as part of the future council's decision making in an LTP. It's easy. There's nothing stopping any of what you're talking about from happening.
Saying that when it comes to full, couple of paragraphs.
And
If I may, I think we'll take a 5-minute adjournment.
so is the recording off? When the recording's off, we'll just have a